Welcome back to Next Generation Teaching, Series 2, Retrieval Practice and Memory, and this is Episode 11. In Episode 9, we built the science foundation, the testing effect, the forgetting curve, why retrieving information is more powerful than restudying it, and in Episode 10, we turned that into a daily classroom habit with low-stakes quizzing, 5 formats, and the week-long routine. Today we go one deeper. We're looking about timing, specifically spaced practice. The idea that when you practice matters as much as whether you practice. That the same retrieval attempt performed at the right moment versus the wrong moment produces dramatically different effects on long-term memory. This is one of the most replicated findings in all of cognitive psychology. Ebbinghaus identified the spacing effect in 1885. More than 140 years of subsequent research has confirmed it, extended it, and applied it to every age group and subject area. It's not a theory, it's one of the most dependable facts we have about human memory works. And here why this matters for your planning. Most teachers who use retrieval practice use it within a lesson or within a unit. Very few use it systematically across units, across terms, and across the whole course. Today I'm going to show you why that cross-unit spacing is where the biggest memory gains live, and how AI makes it genuinely straightforward to build into your curriculum design. By the end of this video, you'll understand what spaced practice is, why the timing of retrieval is so critical, how to schedule it at lesson, unit, and year level, and how to use AI to do most of the planning work in minutes rather than hours. So let me start with the distinction that sounds obvious but has profound implications for how we plan teaching. Massed practice, what most people call cramming, means concentrating all your study in one block. Students do this the night before a test. Departments do it in revision lessons. It works in the short term, performance improves rapidly during the session, and students finish feeling like they know the material. The illusion of learning is powerful. The problem is what happens next. Without additional retrieval, the forgetting curve kicks in immediately. The material decays, and what felt solid the night before the exam has often substantially faded by the time the exam arrives a month later. Cramming works for tomorrow, but it doesn't work for the exam, and it certainly does not work for the kind of deep, flexible, transferable knowledge we're actually trying to build. Spaced practice, also called distributed practice, takes the same total amount of study time and distributes it across multiple sessions separated by gaps. The same number of hours, the same content, but spread out rather than concentrated. The research is unambiguous. This produces dramatically better long-term retention. Why? Because of what happens during the gap. Memory starts to fade, then just as it is beginning to fade, at the point of effortful retrieval, the student retrieves it again. That retrieval effort at that moment of partial forgetting is what rebuilds and strengthens the memory trace. The gap is not wasted time, the gap is the mechanism. Students intuitively resist this. Space practice feels less productive during each individual session because the retrieval is harder. Massed practice feels more productive because fluency builds within the session. But fluency within a session and retention across weeks are completely different things. Our jobs as teachers is to design for the latter, even when it feels less satisfying in the moment. So cramming works for tomorrow, spaced practice works for the exam, and for every lesson, assessment, and conversation that comes after it. The spacing effect is amongst the most consistently replicated findings in all of cognitive psychology. Let me give you the key evidence that underpins everything in this episode. Ebbinghaus in 1885, the original discovery. Hermann Ebbinghaus did not only discover the forgetting curve, he also discovered the spacing effect, the finding that distributing practice across time produces far greater long-term retention than mass practice, even when the total study time is equal. This has been replicated across subjects, age groups, and cultures for over 140 years. The replication rate is close to 100%. This is as close to a law of learning as cognitive science gets. Dunlosky et al. 2013 high utility confirmed. In the same meta-analysis that elevated retrieval practice, Dunlosky's team also rated distributed practice as high utility, one of only 2 strategies to achieve that rating. They note specifically that the combination of spacing and retrieval testing is particularly powerful. When you retrieve information at spaced intervals, rather than just rereading at spaced intervals, the effects compound. The 2 strategies are most effective when used together. Cornell and Bjork, 2008, transfer advantage. Space practice doesn't just improve retention of what was studied, it produces better transfer, the ability to apply knowledge in new contexts that weren't part of the original learning. This is the difference between remembering a fact and being able to use it. Cornell and Bjork found that space practice produced significantly better performance than massed practice when students were tested on novel examples, demonstrating that the spacing advantage extends beyond simple recall to the kind of flexible application we want students to develop. Cepeda et al. 2006 Optimal Gaps. This meta-analysis introduced a crucial refinement. The optimal gap between practice session grows with the retention interval that you need. If you need students to remember something for 1 week, shorter gaps work. If you need them to remember it for a year, for a GCSE exam taken 18 months after first teaching, you need longer gaps between retrieval sessions. The implication for curriculum design is significant. We should be revisiting key content much further back in time than most teachers currently do. And the EEF rates space practice and retrieval practice amongst the highest impact, lowest cost strategies in its toolkit, available to every teacher in every lesson, starting with your next planning session. So again, the AI prompt is at the bottom. Explain the spacing effect and desirable difficulty to a Year 11 student preparing for their GCSE exams. Use an everyday analogy with no jargon. Keep it under 90 seconds to deliver. Teaching your students this will help them to come on board and to use this not just in your lessons, but hopefully in their revision sessions at home as well. So let's make this concrete. Without any retrieval after a lesson, the forgetting curve looks like this. Within 24 hours, 67% of new learning is gone. Within a week, 75% has faded. Within a month, it's close to 79%. The curve is steep and relentless. Now introduce 1 spaced retrieval session. Not a full lesson of revision, just a 5-question quiz a week after the original lesson. What happens? The retrieval attempt at day 7 finds a memory that is substantially faded but not gone. The effort of retrieval rebuilds it. More importantly, it raises the baseline. After that second retrieval, the forgetting curve starts from a higher point. Decay is slower. Retention after a month is significantly higher. Add a third retrieval session, 3 weeks after the second, and the effect compounds again. After 3 spaced retrieval sessions, research suggests that students can typically retain 70 to 80% of the original material at the 1-month mark, which is much higher than the percent retained from a single lesson with no followed-up retrieval. The difference is not incremental, it's transformational, although obviously this will depend on the types of question that you asked and how well you do it, as well as each individual student. Here is the critical point though. The timing of that second retrieval session matters enormously. If it's too soon, the same day or the following day, and the memory hasn't faded enough for the retrieval to be effortful, the desirable difficulty isn't there. The memory strengthening doesn't happen. Too late, several months later with no intermediate retrieval, and so much has been forgotten that the session functions as a reteaching rather than a retrieval. The research on optimal spacing intervals tells us that the ideal gap grows over time. The first retrieval 1 or 2 days later after learning, second 1 to 2 weeks later, third 3 to 4 weeks later. After that, monthly retrieval is sufficient to maintain high retention across a course. Each spaced retrieval session doesn't just slow forgetting, It raises the retention baseline. After 3 sessions, memory stabilizes at approximately 70% plus long term. That's the mechanism that you're designing your curriculum and your space practice for. So let's just translate the research into the 6 timing windows you actually need for classroom and curriculum planning. The same day end of lesson. The exit ticket or plenary quiz functions as the first retrieval moment within the same lesson whilst the content is still fresh. This produces immediate reinforcement and provides formative data. It's not the space session, but it helps to reinforce the learning which has taken place that lesson. 1 or 2 days later, the next lesson starter. This is the primary spaced retrieval moment for most classroom teachers. The 5 question starter from the previous lesson. The gap of 1 or 2 days is long enough for some forgetting to begin, making the retriever effortful without making it impossible. This is where the habit, episode 9, comes into play. 1 week is your weekly review. At least 1 question from the previous week in every starter quiz. 1 week is an important threshold in the spacing research. Much of the forgetting occurs within the first 48 hours, so by this point, most of the forgetting has occurred without being irretrievable. Retrieving at this point produces a significant memory strengthening effect. If you only have 1 space question to add beyond the previous lesson, make it a 1-week-old question. Then you have 2 to 3 weeks. The unit midpoint, a retrieval grid or knowledge check that covers everything taught in the unit so far, not just the most recent lesson. This is also the point where interleaving becomes possible, mixing questions from the current unit with questions from the previous unit. The spacing effect and the interleaving effect combine here, producing compounded benefits. 1 month plus interleave review. Questions from the previous unit mixed into current unit quizzes. This is cross-topic retrieval when it builds the kind of flexible, comparative thinking that higher level exam questions require. Students cannot answer a significance question or an essay comparing 2 periods without being able to retrieve both periods simultaneously. Interleave spacing builds that capacity. And then you have 1 term plus, a cumulative review. 2 questions from last term in every weekly quiz. This is the hardest to maintain without a system and the most powerful for long-term course retention. Students preparing for A-level or GCSE exams need to hold Year 10 content in memory through to the end of Year 11, and that requires deliberate, planned retrieval of that content at regular intervals across 2 years. Without a system, it simply doesn't happen. So again, there's an AI prompt at the bottom of the screen. Build a 6-week spaced retrieval schedule for, and then put your topic. For each week, suggest 3 questions that retrieve content from that week, 2 weeks ago, and 1 month ago. Include brief model answers. So here's where AI transforms this from a strategy you understand into a strategy you can actually implement systematically. The barrier to space practice at scale has always been the same, the planning overhead. Mapping which topics need retrieval in which lessons across a full term or a full year is a significant cognitive task. AI does it in under 2 minutes. So you have your long-term spacing map. Paste your medium-term plan or scheme of work into AI and ask it to design a spacing schedule. It will identify which topics are covered in which weeks and build a week-by-week retrieval plan that automatically spaces each topic at the optimal intervals. What would take an experienced curriculum designer an hour to produce manually takes AI no more than 90 seconds. You then review it, adjust it where you need to, and then you can use it for the whole term. Interleaved question sets. AI generates question sets that deliberately mix content from different units, reproducing the interleaving effect. This is demonstrated across multiple studies, including Cornell and Bjork in 2008 and Rower and Taylor in 2007, that shows mixed practice is more effective than blocked practice for long-term retention and transfer. For AI to support in this, You can specify the topics, the year group, the difficulty level, and the AI produces a mixed question set with a mark scheme. Run this as a mid-unit or an end-of-unit retrieval task. Backwards planned exam preparation. For Year 11 and 13, the most powerful use of AI in spacing is working backwards from the exam date. Give the AI the exam date, the number of remaining lessons, and the list of topics. Ask it to build a retrieval schedule that prioritizes topics not revisited recently, builds in increasingly spaces as the exam approaches, and ensures that every topic is retrieved at least twice in the final 6 weeks. This is genuine curriculum design that most teachers don't have time to do manually, and AI makes it routine. A cumulative quiz bank. AI builds a growing question bank for a unit, starting with 5 questions in week 1 and adding to it each subsequent week, so that by week 6, students are retrieving questions from every stage of their learning within the unit. The cumulative bank becomes your starter quiz for the whole unit without additional planning after the initial generation. The desirable difficulty escalator. This is one of the most powerful applications. Drawing on Bloom's taxonomy and retrieval practice research, we can look at the 3-visit sequence. AI can support in designing a 3-visit sequence for each key concept. The first retrieval is simple recall, just the fact or the definition. The second is application. Use the knowledge to explain or analyze something. The third is evaluation. Compare, judge significance, or construct an argument. Each visit builds on the last, and the spacing between visits ensures the memory is genuinely strengthened at each stage. AI saves planning time. You bring the curriculum knowledge and the professional judgment about sequencing. That combination, AI efficiency plus teacher expertise, is what makes this sustainable. Again, the AI prompt at the bottom. I teach English. Here is my full unit outline. Then you paste it in. Design a term-long spaced retrieval schedule with questions mapped to optimal review intervals for each topic. Include a week-by-week planner. Let me give you a framework for thinking about where spacing lives in your planning, because it operates at 3 levels, and the most impactful level is the one most teachers never reach. Lesson level, the 5-minute retrieval bracket. Every lesson begins with a starter that reaches back. 3 questions from last lesson, 1 from last week, 1 from last month. Every lesson ends with an exit ticket that does the same. These are the regular high-frequency retrieval moments that build the foundation of space practice. AI generates them in seconds. This is the level we covered in depth in episode 9. It's the non-negotiable baseline. Unit level, cumulative retrieval woven in. Now here's where most teachers stop, but shouldn't. When you write a unit plan, the first question you should ask is not only what will I teach, but when will I teach each part of this to be retrieved again? Lesson 4 should retrieve lessons 1 and 2. Lessons 8 should retrieve lessons 3 to 5. The final lesson of every unit should be a full cumulative retrieval lesson. Not a lesson introducing new content, but a lesson where students retrieve everything covered in the unit at intervals that are already beginning to space. And critically, the unit plan should already include questions that reach back to the previous unit. The moment a new unit begins, the previous unit starts to be forgotten. If your planning doesn't account for that, you are teaching to short-term memory and hoping that it transfers to long-term memory on its own, but it won't. Year level, interleaved cross-topic spacing. This is the level that transforms exam performance. At year level, every half-term's retrieval schedule should include 2 questions from the previous half-term. Mock exam preparation should be backwards planned from the exam date, with a spacing schedule that ensures every topic from the entire course is retrieved at least twice in the final term. Year 11 and 13 students who have had content spaced systematically across 2 years arrive at the exam having retrieved key knowledge many times over, building the kind of durable, long-term memory that single-term cramming cannot produce. AI builds the year-level spacing map from your scheme of work. One planning session, 20 minutes, the whole year designed. That's not a marginal efficiency gain. That's a fundamental shift in how curriculum is architected. So, here's an AI prompt again. Here is my Year 10 math scheme of work. Then you paste it in. Redesign the planning so that spaced retrieval of previous units is built into each lesson starter and plenary across the full year. Produce a table, week current topic spaced retrieval targets, and then implement this into your teaching. As we've said, spaced practice is one of the most powerful strategies available and one of the easiest to implement incorrectly. Here are the 5 most common pitfalls. Spacing only within a single unit. If all your retrieval questions comes from the current topic, you're not doing spaced practice, you're recapping. Spaced practice requires crossing unit and crossing topic boundaries. The most powerful retrieval sessions reach back to content that students have not actually thought about for weeks or even months. If your retrieval starters only ever reference last lesson or last week, the long-term retention benefits are substantially diminished. Leaving spacing as an informal add-on. If your spacing intention lives in your head rather than in your planning document, it will not survive the pressures of the term. Map your spacing schedule when you write the unit plan before you teach a single lesson. Use AI to generate the question bank for the whole unit in one session. When term gets busy and marking piles up, the spacing questions are already prepared and waiting. Students resist. I don't remember any of this. This is the desired effect and it needs reframing explicitly. When students reach back to content from 4 weeks ago and struggle, that struggle is the spacing mechanism activating. Explain it directly. The harder it is to retrieve, the more you're strengthening the memory. Low scores now, high retention later. If students cannot retrieve anything at all, the gap is too long or the initial encoding was too shallow. Shorten the gap and build from there. Spacing feels like reteaching. If students genuinely blank on spaced questions, the instinct is to explain it again. Resist this. Give a retrieval clue, a sentence starter, a key word, a prompt, and let them struggle first. The retrieval attempt, even a partially successful one, produces far more memory strengthening than being given the answer. Reteaching should be a last resort, after a genuine retrieval effort has been made and failed. Forgetting spacing during busy periods. The solution to this is preparation and not willpower. Pre-generate your spaced question bank for the full term at the start of term using AI in one sitting of 20 minutes. When you're in the middle of marking a set of mock exams, you do not need to create questions. They are already there. The habit survives the pressure because the preparation happened before the pressure arrived. So let's consolidate. The spacing effect is one of the most dependable facts in educational research. Distributed practice produces dramatically better long-term retention than mass practice, with the same total study time. Ebbinghaus identified it in 1885. Over 140 years of research has confirmed it. The EEF rates it as high impact, low cost, and accessible to every teacher. The timing of retrieval matters as much as whether retrieval happens. Retrieve too soon and there's no benefit. Retrieve too late and relearning from scratch often occurs. Retrieve at the optimal gap and each session raises the retention baseline. Compounds with the next session and builds the kind of durable, flexible memory that survives the exam and beyond. And AI does the scheduling. What was previously a significant planning overhead is now a 90-second prompt. Now there are 4 things to carry forward. Spacing beats massing always. Designed for long-term retention and not short-term fluency. The gap is the mechanism. Retrieve just as forgetting begins. That effort is what rebuilds and strengthens the memory trace. The gap is not wasted time. Build it in. not on. Spacing in your planning document mapped before the unit starts. AI generates the question banks in one section. Operate at all three levels: lesson bracket, unit cumulative retrieval, and year level cross-topic spacing. Each level compounds the one below. So, your 4 actions this week. Use prompt 1 to build a long-term spacing map for your current unit. Paste your scheme of work in and get a week-by-week retrieval schedule back. Use prompt 2 to generate a cumulative quiz bank for a unit you're currently teaching. Add questions to it each week. Use prompt 4 to create an interleave question set mixing your 2 most recently completed topics. Use prompt 6 to build a desirable difficulty escalator for one key concept: recall, then application, then evaluation, spaced across 3 lessons. As always, here are all the AI prompts we have used during this episode, so please feel free to take a screenshot to use whenever you're planning. Again, please find some of the studies used if you would like to look a little bit deeper into the research behind it. So thank you for watching episode 11 from Next Generation Teaching. Episode 12 is next, Interleaving. Why mixing topics builds stronger memories. We'll look at how interleaving content within and across units produces transfer advantages that blocked practice cannot match, and how AI designs interleave resources that are genuinely ready to use. So if you like this video, please click on the like button and subscribe for future videos. Thank you for watching.